If you have been photographing for long enough, there is a good chance a 50mm lens taught you more about photography than any camera ever did. It may have arrived with your first film SLR, stayed on your DSLR for years, or became the prime you trusted when you wanted fewer decisions between yourself and the photograph. But the greatest 50mm lenses were not always the sharpest. These are 7 of the greatest 50mm lenses ever made, and number 1 turned an ordinary focal length into a myth. You are watching Alt Buzz Lenses, where the lenses photographers remember matter just as much as the ones that win modern tests. So if that sounds like your kind of story, stay close and subscribe before we begin. This is not a buying guide. It is not a sharpness ranking, and it is not a list built around the newest mirrorless releases. It is a Hall of Fame, built around lenses that shaped the history, the reputation, and the emotional meaning of one focal length. Some of these lenses earned their place through mechanical honesty. Others earned it through ambition, through influence, or through the kind of mythology that outlives every spec sheet. No lens here needed to win every category. It only needed to matter. At number 7, we have the Asahi Pentax Super-Takumar 50mm f1.4. For a lot of photographers, this was not a lens they chose. It was a lens that arrived with them, handed down inside a camera bag, bought secondhand, waiting on a shelf in a father's closet. It did not belong to the wealthy or the professional class. It belonged to whoever picked up a camera and wanted to learn. Its screw mount helped it travel further than almost any lens of its era, finding its way onto bodies far beyond its own brand. What people remember is not a number on a test chart. It is the weight of the focusing ring turning smoothly under a thumb, the quiet mechanical confidence of a lens built to be used for decades rather than admired for a season. Wide open, it still renders with a softness that feels earned rather than accidental. And on modern mirrorless cameras, it adapts easily enough that its story has not ended. It is not without its age. Some versions carry yellowing glass, some show the wear of 50 years of ownership, and its wide-open performance was never meant to compete with anything built today. But the Super-Takumar became memorable because it gave ordinary photographers the kind of mechanical experience that now feels increasingly rare. It enters the Hall of Fame not because it was rare, but because it was not. Pentax made mechanical quality accessible. What came next demanded something more dangerous: speed that still depended entirely on the person holding it. At number 6, we have the Nikon AIS Nikkor 50mm f1.2. There was a time when an aperture this fast was not a convenience. It was a test. No autofocus motor was coming to save a missed frame. If the focus was wrong, the photographer was wrong, and everyone knew the difference between the two. This lens carried Nikon's long professional heritage into the hands of photographers who wanted brightness and were willing to earn it. Focusing at close range, wide open, required patience most modern shooters have never needed to build. And yet photographers kept reaching for it, because what it gave back, when everything aligned, had a character no automated system has ever fully replicated. Its mechanical build only reinforced the feeling that this was a tool meant to be respected, not merely operated. It is not forgiving. There is no autofocus. Aberrations show themselves at the widest settings, and compatibility across different Nikon bodies and adapters has to be checked with care rather than assumed. But this lens preserves something rare: the relationship between fast optics, mechanical control, and a photographer's own developed skill. It enters the Hall of Fame because that relationship still matters, even in an era of focus tracking and eye detection. Nikon's lens belonged to the great age of first-party SLR glass. What came next proved that a challenger could stand in that same room. At number 5, we have Sigma's Art series, 50mm f1.4. For a long time, third-party lenses carried a quiet assumption. They were the cheaper option, the compromise, the thing you bought when you could not afford the real one. Sigma's global vision era did not ask photographers to accept that assumption. It asked them to reconsider it entirely. This lens was large for a standard prime, heavier than tradition suggested it needed to be, and it did not apologize for either. What it offered instead was correction and sharpness pursued with a seriousness that forced the established manufacturers to explain, publicly, why their own lenses deserved a premium. Photographers began choosing it not because it was affordable, but because they preferred what it produced. That shift in thinking mattered more than any individual review ever could. It is not a lens without friction. Its size can be difficult to love. Its autofocus accuracy depends on calibration, mount, and condition, and native mirrorless designs have since matched or exceeded its balance and quietness. But its importance was never only about specifications. It enters the Hall of Fame because it changed what photographers expected a third-party badge to mean. Sigma challenged the established brands with size and correction. What came next asked whether that same ambition could learn to trust itself completely. At number 4, we have the Sony FE 50mm f1.2 GM. An aperture this fast has always been a gamble. Earlier lenses built at this speed asked photographers to accept difficult focusing, softness, or a kind of specialist patience most working professionals could not afford on a wedding day. Sony's lens did something quieter but more significant. It made that gamble disappear. With modern eye detection and subject tracking behind it, an aperture that once demanded a steady hand and a forgiving client suddenly became dependable. Portrait and wedding photographers could trust it in motion, in changing light, in the unpredictable seconds a real event never repeats. Its achievement was not simply building another Fast 50. It was making f1.2 behave like a normal part of a professional system, rather than a specialist risk. It carries a cost for that confidence. It is expensive, larger than most photographers strictly need, and unnecessary for anyone who commonly stops down. Technical excellence alone does not make it historically important, and many photographers would be equally well served by something smaller. But it enters the Hall of Fame because it represents the moment a fast, normal lens became precise, automated, and finally dependable. If you enjoy lens history built around influence, ownership, and character, rather than specifications alone, this is a good moment to subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses, so you don't miss what belongs at number 3, number 2, and number 1. Sony pursued speed without surrendering usability. What came next chose a different route entirely, refusing to chase the largest aperture at all. At number 3, we have the Leica APO-Summicron-M 50mm f2. Greatness does not always need a wide aperture to prove itself. This lens is the quiet argument against that assumption. Leica did not attempt to attract attention with speed. It attempted something harder, taking a specification photographers had already considered ordinary and making it extraordinarily difficult to improve upon. Apochromatic correction inside a compact rangefinder body is not a simple engineering problem, and Leica kept investing in it long after the market might have expected them to stop. What this lens represents is restraint as philosophy, refinement pursued for its own sake, mechanical precision as part of the ownership experience rather than a footnote to it. Holding it, focusing it, using it, all of that is part of what the lens is. It is not a value recommendation. It requires a Leica M-compatible system. It is manual focus, and its advantages may not announce themselves in every photograph a person takes. But it enters the Hall of Fame because it proves that refinement can matter as much as speed, and that an ordinary specification can still become an extraordinary pursuit. Leica refined the 50mm lens at the product level. The next name belongs here because its influence reaches far deeper, into the optical logic behind generations of normal lenses. At number 2, we have the Carl Zeiss Planar T 50mm f1.4. This story is not about one perfect lens. It is about an idea that became so successful it stopped looking like an idea at all. The planar design family shaped normal lens development across generations and across manufacturers. and this particular Zeiss expression became one of its most recognizable photographic forms. Photographers came to associate the Zeiss name with contrast, with color, with a particular honesty and rendering that felt distinct from its competitors. Multiple versions of this lens exist across different mounts and different eras, and identifying the exact one under discussion matters more here than almost anywhere else in this countdown. But the deeper point remains steady. The planar's optical logic became influential enough that its descendants eventually stopped looking revolutionary and simply began looking normal. Performance and compatibility vary meaningfully between versions. Many are manual focus only, and modern lenses can technically outperform older examples without controversy. Its place in the Hall of Fame is not a claim that every version is superior. It is a claim about influence, and few normal lenses have influenced more. The planar shaped what a normal lens became. But number 1 did something very different. It made the normal lens feel almost impossible. At number 1, we have the Canon 50mm f/0.95, remembered by photographers as the dream lens. The words f/0.95 appeared on a lens in the early 1960s, and photography has not entirely recovered from the attention that number demanded. This is not the sharpest lens in this countdown. It is not the most corrected, and it was never the most practical. It is here because it turned a familiar focal length into an object of fascination. Photographers remember its nickname more easily than its technical name, and that alone tells you something about what this lens became. An aperture this fast, built during the rangefinder era, was as much a statement of ambition as it was a photographic tool. Focusing it wide open was never easy. Its results were never flawless, but its imperfections became part of its mythology, rather than a complaint against it, and that mythology has only grown with time. It is heavy, difficult to focus, optically imperfect by modern standards, and expensive enough that condition, servicing, and conversion history all matter before anyone should consider owning one. It was never meant to be a sensible everyday recommendation, and it still is not. Canon did not create the dream lens by building the most perfect 50. It created it by making photographers believe a normal lens could still be extraordinary. The greatest lens does not always produce the cleanest test chart. Sometimes it becomes great because it captures the ambition, the imagination, and the limitations of the era that made it. It enters at number 1 because it turned the standard lens into a legend. Now it's your turn. Which 50mm lens belongs in your personal Hall of Fame? And is it there because of image quality, mechanical character, or the memories you made with it? And a second question. Just for those of you who have been doing this a while, was your first serious lens a 50, and do you still own it today? Tell us in the comments below. Cameras changed, focusing changed, film became digital, and lens design became more precise than any of these 7 lenses could have imagined. But the 50mm lens remained close enough to ordinary vision that every generation found a new way to make it extraordinary. For more stories about the lenses photographers used, trusted, and remembered, subscribe to Alt Buzz Lenses.